right. Uh, Death metal trio Ulthar have hit us with their third and fourth full lengths simultaneously, and for most fans, Anthronomicon, the third full length, technically, even though the distinction is kind of arbitrary, uh, is probably the one that is going to be most related to what you're expecting from the band after Cosmovore and Providence. It really does continue on from where Providence left off in a lot of ways, while incorporating a little bit more technical incorporation of like black thrash metal ideas. And I think that's a level of nuance that most people aren't going to care that much about until they've listened to it for quite a bit. This is still very dense death metal with an old school streak to its progressive slash technical ways, and not in a performative sense so much as just an interesting textural experience that this time leans a little bit more classic in its just general way of movement. Of course, this is what a lot of people would consider a collection of pretty impressive musicians who have extensive resumes overall between Steve Peacock's work in Mastery, Spirit Possession, and plenty of other groups, and Shelby Lermo's work in Vastum, Human Corpse Abuse, and plenty of other groups. And of course, Justin Ennis has played in everything from Mutilation Rites to various other bands you'd recognize if you go look that up yourself. And the important thing here is that they established a core idea back in 2016 that they've advanced pretty quickly on with each release. Now, where does this album go that they haven't gone before? I think is kind of the interesting question I had to ask myself, and it's it's not so much a switch of setting so much as it is a switch of the way they've approached the blender of ideas that they were throwing at you before. Before, the scatterbrained, Demolic-esque nature of a lot of their work took over kind of the mind share when it was time to induct into and get down to the details. But here, the the flow of it is much more natural between the technical black metal and black thrash elements and the old school death metal elements, and all of this works together in a pretty interesting way that goes beyond wearing its influences loudly while hitting the random number generator, as it were, with the riffs. So a lot of these make sense. They flow together really well, and we'll have a clip right here to just show how well I think everything does fit together. So with Saccades, we get a one of the more black metal leaning, more textural pieces on the record that is not at all indicative of the actual thrust of the general record, which focuses much more on the riff and passing through in a logical yet illogical sequence of events that really it's the kind of thing that I could just listen to for hours and hours, and I have, where it's just fully entertaining where they go from place to place within each song, and it eventually the sort of subgenre lines and the references that you might make in relating to the music begin to blur away, and you get the general palette that Ulthar are working with, which is becoming more and more distinct with each release. So the clip shows how far they can go with the throughway of it all. But you're going to find when I get to Helionomicon, that entire album is an example of that, the way that could work. This is an album that is much more traditional, like 5-minute songs that cut through a set of really great riffs and show the skill that they have when they're really flying high on details. And that's really where this album won me over, was in the details and how it it's not just turning on a dime, but it's doing it with a lot of sense. And we're not just hearing a lot of easy finished death metal references, but we're hearing a lot more in general from the band and their own unique influences that they bring as a trio. So overall, it's Well, of course, it's one of the best releases of February, and my rating was pretty high for it because I enjoyed it obviously that much. I think that it, since writing the review, I've it's appreciated even more. I think this is a pretty safe assumption that this is up there in the top two of the month, and we'll get to its other half, its sister album, in a separate video because I think it deserves to be considered as a different thing. And I don't know if it's, we'll get to that, but this is the big deal this month in terms of death metal, and just a fantastic album. I think the more that the album art, the production values, the performances, getting the layout of the land, and it's a spectacular thing. Where before they were almost there, and I think this is the record where they're fully there, and it's a thing that I think will universally impress a lot of people compared to kind of the muddy, stretchy freak out that some of the previous two albums were for a lot of people. So definitely a high recommendation. A lot more details in the review, and we'll throw another clip at you as the score goes full screen.